if you're child free and all of your friends, like all of my friends have kids. I only have a few friends who are child free. And so I think when you're adjusting, to how your friends are growing and what their families are turning into, you're having to adjust to something that's out of your control. It's a choice that you didn't make, but you're having to adjust and say, okay, how can I grow with this relationship? Because clearly my friends are having to grow in their relationships with their kids and in their relationships with themselves.
I'm Keltie McGuire, and you're listening to the Kids Are Child Free podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Kids Are Child Free podcast. Today, we're going to have a lot of fun because we're doing something a little different, I guess, in a sense. First of all, I am hosting not one, but two fantastic guests. And one of them is a mom. The other is child-free by choice. They are business partners. They are best friends. I'm speaking with Emmalee Bierly and Jennifer Chaiken, who are co-owners of the private therapy practice, The Therapy Group, and co-hosts of the Shrink Chicks podcast, which I had the good fortune of being on in the last couple months. We'll make sure to link to that episode in the show notes. And when I had that conversation with them on their own podcast, I thought, you know what, we need to get these ladies on to talk about friendships between moms and non-moms, because there can be some tensions there. Let's be honest. I get many messages from folks who are either on the fence or who have decided to stay child-free who say, I'm struggling in my friendships with mom friends because I feel like we're just living such different lives. Sometimes there may be unspoken expectations from one person or another. Of course, it can go the other direction where women have children and they feel like their child-free friends just don't really get it anymore. And I thought that these two are not only therapists, but they are such a positive example of how a really beautiful relationship between two people who have made different choices can look. So you're in for a lot of fun with us today. These two are an absolute blast to speak to. Lovely ladies, thank you for joining me today. We're already having fun. I cannot wait for this conversation all about the kids or child-free decision and friendships between moms and child-free people. This is like a big, sticky, tricky topic. Is this something that either of you have either struggled with or that you hear about from clients or friends?
Yeah. I feel like there's like this undercurrent. We talk a lot about it in terms of like moms with kids, of like the mommy wars of like, what developmental stages your cat at. But I feel like there's an undercurrent as well with like, she doesn't have kids, so she doesn't really get it, right? Like, and that can be true in some sense, but I think it can really create a rupture in a friendship that we don't talk about enough. And I don't think we talk enough about, there's 50 billion podcasts about improving our romantic relationships and our marital relationships, and friendships, we know statistically bring us just as much, often more, joy than romantic relationships. And yet we lose these phenomenal relationships based on life decisions, and we're not having enough conversations around it.
We should start another podcast.
Definitely. Let's just keep podcasting.
And Jen, I want to hear from you as well. But maybe first, let's just set the stage so everyone, if they're not familiar with you, knows who we're speaking to. And Jennifer, why don't we hear from you first? Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Absolutely. My name is Jennifer Chaiken. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I am a co-owner with Emmalee of the Therapy Group. We are a private psychotherapy practice. We practice all across the United States. And we also have a podcast called Shrink Chicks, where we talk about mental health topics. We make them relatable. We answer all your questions. And when it comes to this episode, I am child-free by choice. And so I would love to continue talking about that.
Okay, awesome. And as a side note, I was recently on this wonderful podcast the Shrink Chicks have. So we'll make sure to link that in the show notes as well, so people can check out that convo. Okay, Emmalee, over to you.
I have the exact same bio as Jen, except for I have two children. So Jen and I have been business partners for the past 12 years, and we've known each other for the past 14. We met in grad school, actually. And I have two kids. And it's been interesting to run. Now our business is pretty big. It started out with just, us in a basement filling our own practice. It got much larger. We didn't really prepare and plan for any of that. And so we've navigated a lot in our relationship of being best friends, running this business together, and I became a mom. And it's been an interesting thing to watch our relationship grow through that.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay. And I was going to ask, like, the fact you met before starting the business, it was not just like, oh, we're professional colleagues, but you guys are besties.
Yes. We met in grad school when we were becoming therapists.
Yeah.
Emmalee came up to me and she said, I'm going to make you my best friend. And I was like, okay.
I love that energy, by the way.
It's so good. She pretty much adopted me. You ever hear how people are like, when you're, an extrovert, you adopt an introvert, and that's exactly what happened. So she adopted me. And then we together birthed our first child together, the therapy group. And then we go from there. So we have these two very specific relationships where we have a business relationship and we have a friendship. And we've navigated this growth and change of Emmalee becoming a mom, and have figured out what that looks like. And I think one of the big things that I would love to talk more about is, and something I've noticed as someone who's child-free, is that when you become a mom, the growth and change that happens within you is so huge. You watch your friends go through this gigantic transformation of becoming a mother. And I think one of the things where people get stuck is that the friendship doesn't grow with the person, which I think is a really important thing to talk about, because we tend to want to hold on to who that person was as opposed to open ourselves up to who that person is becoming and who they're growing into. And I think that that's one of the big challenges that we see in our clients, something that we've had to navigate, is that just allowing the person to change and to be able to adjust with that change is really important in terms of your relationship with that person.
Yeah. Gosh, I think that's so hard, right? Because when we think about someone having her child or not, I know for me, like when I was on the fence, I think part of what I felt, aside from like the loneliness and alienation of not knowing and being clear, was the fact that it was almost like I was closing a door on a certain chapter of my life. And in many ways, I don't want to say my youth, because I mean, we're all still relatively young, right? And youth is an attitude, yada, yada. But it was sort of like the way things were. It was this knowing that it will never be the same again in many ways, which feels so heartbreaking, right? Like, I'm guessing when the two of you ladies met, you were probably in your early 20s?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And life looks different today, right? So it's like, I think part of this, the change that, I mean, we all experience change, but mothers in particular go through, it also connects to the fact that like life is just changing, and that's really hard. That's something we want to hold on to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, when we'll get into questions, I'm sure, but, when, if you're child free and all of your friends, like all of my friends have kids, I only have a few friends who are child free. And so I think when you're adjusting, to how your friends are growing and what their families are turning into, you're having to adjust to something that's out of your control, right? It's a change. Yeah. It's a choice that you didn't make, but you're having to adjust and say, okay, how can I grow with this relationship? Because clearly my friends are having to grow in their relationships with their kids and in their relationships with themselves.
Yeah. I'm interested. I mean, we won't get too much into the backstory as far as your individual decisions, only because I want to make sure we center this more on friendship. But in light of the friendship topic, were either of you former fence sitters? Were you always solid in your preference or decision, your choice? And like, how did that come into play? Like before either of you, I mean, Jennifer, obviously you've remained child-free throughout, but like before Emmalee had kids, were the two of you, like, was there a point you were on the same page where you're both like, oh, I don't know? Or was it always very clear? Maybe Emmalee, you can tell. It's just shaking her head.
It was very true. I always wanted to have kids. I have a 6.5 year age gap between my kids. And so I always knew I wanted kids. After I had the first one, I was like, not sure if I can do this again. But besides that, I always knew. And Jen, I would say you were 1% didn't know. You were always pretty sure you were not interested in having kids.
I was always pretty sure. And I would say like there's fleeting moments where I'm like, oh, that'd be nice. But it's right.
Yeah.
When your grandfather died was the only time I had heard you say like,
Yes.
oh, like we were all around him and I like thought about family and kids in a different way. That was the only time I've even heard you maybe have one fleeting second of it.
I will have fleeting moments.
Yeah.
And then I remind myself that this is such a huge decision that cannot be made off of fleeting moments. I'm so sure within myself and have been so sure. And I kept waiting because people kept saying to me, oh, you know, as your friends have kids and as people have kids, like you'll feel differently. And so I kept like waiting for that moment and it just never came.
I appreciate you giving voice to the fact there can be fleeting moments. Like it's, you can have confidence and certainty and also have a small part of yourself, even if it's that like 1%, that tiny piece that sometimes says, oh, in those big moments, it makes sense, you know, like a loss in a family or a big holiday, or maybe seeing like a, you know, beautiful new baby come into this world, whatever, like, but it doesn't mean it's the wrong decision.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's something I've allowed myself to have. And I think that, you know, maybe when people are more on the fence, it gives them pause to like, oh my God, why am I having this? Like, what does this mean? I more so just allow those fleeting moments to happen and say like, okay, like I let it come in and I let it go out. And I say, you know, it doesn't speak to like where I am or like how I feel deep within myself. But yeah, I just allow myself to have fleeting moments and I assume that they're going to continue to happen over time.
Yeah. I'm interested to hear like what it was like for the two of you when Emmalee decided to try for children. Like, was Jen like, no, don't do it, wait, or were you excited, or like? I want to hear more from Emmalee though. Maybe you can tell me like, and this might be a good time to also talk about the notion of readiness. But like, how did you know you were ready to take that step forward?
So I have sort of an interesting story, which is I had a lot of external pressure to have kids because of medical reasons. So I have severe endometriosis. But here's the funny part. I was diagnosed with PCOS in my 20s.
Oh God.
Thought I had PCOS. Got treated for PCOS. Turns out I don't have PCOS. I had endometriosis. But so I was feeling, I had a doctor say to me, like, listen, like you're in your late 20s, you better try to have a kid now. Like your fertility is going to go down and you're going to have these issues. So Jen and I had talked. I was like, I'm going to try to have a kid. And it took me 2.5 years to have my first daughter. And in that conversation, our business looked very, very different at the time. Right?
So
like when I first had Millie, incredibly different as for how big our business is now. So at the time, it was kind of like, oh, Emilee's going to have a kid and we like still see our own clients and like life is really different. And so I don't feel like the conversations, and also like I will say I had my daughter at 29, which to me feels like a teen pregnancy compared to everyone else on the East Coast, right? Like my mom had me at 43, right? So my mom had me at 43. Most people I know don't have kids until past 35.
Yeah,
so
wow.
I was waiting.
And she was like the
fun
first.
When I had a kid, like, wasn't it sort of like, oh, Emilee's like going to have this baby and like how cute and exciting. I was like the first one, right? And then I had like, you know, a complete severe postpartum depression. So I feel like the conversations were really different when I was like, I want to have my second kid. So I had 4 miscarriages after my firstborn. And so going through, I would not have survived everything I went through without Jen, because it was such a traumatizing experience. And I mean, I was doing ketamine therapy every 2 weeks. I mean, I was like catatonic at a point. It was very, very bad. And so then when I finally made the decision that I was going to go through with IVF, I think is when we started having a lot of conversations about like, what is work going to look like and how are we going to make this function? Because we both were sort of like, oh, this is going to really take over a lot of your life, right? Like you're at those appointments like every day. Like IVF is like a huge commitment. And I didn't exactly have great results at the beginning. So I ended up having to do a few rounds of this. And I think the conversations were mainly work related, because one of the things that we have discovered in our relationship is I think that there is this notion around moms that people without kids aren't going to get it. And that's true. They maybe don't get some of it. But the other thing is Jen doesn't put her shit onto me, right? So sometimes if I talk to my other friends, they're very quick to be like, oh, well, I did this, or well, did you try this, right? People are really into giving advice. Oh, well, did you do acupuncture for fertility? Did you try this? Did you try this? Did you stop eating carbs? You know what I mean? Like all the bullshit people say. And Jen never did any of that. She didn't have any of her own things. So instead, she just listened and asked me how I was.
Yeah.
And that support was insanely different. That was the life-changing support that I needed. And I don't think people realize that, is that we have this idea that someone else's lived experience is better for support. And it's not necessarily true, because Jen wasn't traumatized by motherhood and fertility. She could actually support me better. I had difficulty with other people that had fertility issues because there was so much of like, well, I did this and I did that. And did you try this? And everyone's always trying to be helpful, but it is a lot to do. And she just never did that.
Wow. Okay. So I have many follow-up questions. I mean, okay, Jen, be honest with us. And I mean, I'm not looking for a certain answer here, but I am curious. Was there I'll just like make sound it out for you. Okay. Was any part of you, even though you knew Emmalee wanted to be a mom, and I'm sure the bigger, better part of you was like, yes, I want this dream for her. Were you a little bit sad when she said she was going to start trying? Was there any part, or were you just like, amazing, you go, girl? Like,
I think the first time I had no feelings about it at all. I was completely supportive.
Yeah.
The second time I was really worried about her having postpartum again. Like that, I think, was my biggest concern for her because of how intense it was the first time. So that, and we talked about that. We like walked around the block. We talked about it. And so the first time, no, I had absolutely, I truly from the depths of my soul only had feelings of support. I assume you felt that.
Yes. But we were pretty nervous the second time.
The second time we were definitely nervous. And honestly, you know, a part of that is because of how big our business was. Like we were just at this time where also we, you know, needed more support in our business. And so we were just at such a different point in our lives and in our business. And I just saw what Emmalee went through after the first time. And so I just, you know, when we talked about it, I just brought that back to the surface. And with that, we talked through it and she recognized it. And honestly, it was a completely different experience this time after having her second.
Wait, I have to ask you, there had to be a part of you that thought I was out of my dang mind to do this again. We had a walk one day, right? I don't remember what we were doing. We were coming from some event and we start walking and I'm like, I think I'm going to do IVF. We sat, her and I walked blocks talking this through. And we both were sort of like, why am I doing this? Like, this is very dumb. And it's not the smartest thing I've ever done. But I was like, I had really gone through it and I was like, I think I really want my daughter to not be alone. So we talk a lot about parenting scripts and what's the reason for doing something, right? What's the decision of doing this? And so for me, having a second child wasn't just about like, I want to do this again. I want a baby in my arms. It was like, I don't want my other daughter to have to take care of me on her own one day. I don't want my other daughter, you know, I want her to have the experience of a sibling. Like part of this was, it wasn't just about making a decision for me anymore. It's about my other child. And not that there's anything wrong with only kids. I just thought if you've met my daughter, you'd be like, this girl needs a sibling. She could use a little in her life. But I think that we were both really scared and Jen tried really hard to be supportive. But I think also was like, oh, Lord, like really, really, honey.
Well, I think I'm also so conscious of not pushing my own opinions onto other people and my own stuff. Like for me, I have never had this desire like deep desire to have children. It just has never hit me. I see this deep desire that other people have to have children, and I just don't have it. And so I'm really conscious of like my own stuff because I'm a therapist too, and I was taught that, you know.
Good person to be friends with, by the way. This is why I think you have such a wonderful functioning relationship.
100%. If only everyone was a therapist.
Really?
Yes.
And so I'm really, really conscious of that. And so I brought up my just concerns about what Emmalee went through the first time and what that would look like. And, you know, she was thinking about it so much. And when you do IVF, you put your body through so much. And I think just watching her go through that, it really speaks to how much you are ready for this or how much you want this because of how much you were going through to get yourself to that point. And she really did think about it a lot. She talked about it a lot.
Well, and we met with a lot of surrogates. So like we had also met with surrogates. We went pretty deep into the surrogacy decision. And my IVF doctor was like, if you want to try one more time, I really think you're going to get pregnant this time. And I did this very specific endometriosis protocol. And so that was, Jen, I will also say, was the most supportive person in my life around surrogates. Jen was just like, hey, like if you get a surrogate, you're not going to have the same experience with postpartum. You're not going to have to go through the breastfeeding bullshit, right? Like here's all this stuff that could like actually be really beneficial. And so I think the other thing Jen did was like, she was like, here's all these different options. You know, like let's look through all of these options. I kind of forgot about the whole surrogacy part. You were so great about that.
I do too. That's so nice to hear because I was like, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, but this feels, but I was like, I'll present all the, you know, like just because there's so many different ways to do this. Yeah. And, you know, just as you said, I assume that people have their own opinions about surrogacy, right? People who are, and everyone has their own opinions on like, what's the way you should go about this? And because I had no interest in becoming a parent and still don't, I just was able to like very plainly be like, here are all of your options without any personal connection to it myself.
All right, I have something different in store today for you. And this is for those of you who may be parents who are listening. Now, I appreciate this is a podcast for people who are on the fence, but I know there are a few folks with kids who also enjoy listening to the podcast, which I take as the highest compliment. I hear that you love the stories here, that perhaps you are a former fence sitter who still finds a lot of value in these conversations. And at the very least, if you are not a parent, I know that you know parents, and I'm going to ask for help with something because I am wanting to spread the word about an upcoming event that I am hosting called Grow or No. This is a workshop for parents who are thinking, do I want to grow my family? Do I want to have another child? Because I've gotten messages from a few of you who have decided to have kids as a result of this podcast and my coaching work, which is just so very cool. And now you're asking, okay, I had one, but are we one and done? Or do we want to have another? And of course, there are a lot of different considerations that come with that. And, you know, it's a kind of being on the fence about having another child. Also, again, I know there are some of you who maybe weren't fence sitters before, but now you're on the fence thinking, do I want to have another kid? So if you can relate to that, or if you know a parent that is grappling with this issue, you can point them the right direction and check out the Grow or No workshop that is happening later this month. I will include the link with details in the show notes of today's episode. But in effect, this is going to help you sort of sift through all of the different factors that are clouding your mind, making it tough to make this decision, to figure out what the best way forward is, both for you, your child or children that you have today, and your family. I hope this will be the first of many Grow or No workshops. That is happening on the 24th of June. And again, you'll find details in the show notes.
I think this is something really important, both for people who are prospective moms or any moms listening to keep in mind, as well as for child-free women, because I think, you know, those without kids, even those who are on the fence, it's easy to feel like we don't have anything to necessarily offer our mom friends, or that like we can't understand. And actually, what I'm hearing is that can be a good thing, and that we can be sort of like the safe, neutral, like Switzerland, whatever, middle ground of like who can just kind of hold that space and be supportive. And so, I mean, Emmalee, maybe you can share like for people who don't have children, who are either on the fence or have decidedly chosen to be child-free, specifically when it comes to loss and IVF and like this whole, even postpartum, like those really difficult, heavy things, how can we as people without kids be that supportive friend? And Jen, of course, I'd love to hear from you as well, because it sounds like you've done it so beautifully.
I think, one of the things Jen did so amazing was she truly just like because she didn't have like skin in the game. She was like, oh, I want to make sure you have a kid, so my kid has a friend, which is like a kind of a thing. She was just there to listen and check in on me. And I think actually because she doesn't have kids of her own, she has a little bit more bandwidth. And I think that's something we do to child-free, especially women a lot, is like sometimes we think that they should always be flexible and we think that they should always come up. And like, I guess in some ways, right? Like, but I think Jen had a better bandwidth of actually supporting me. And what it just looked like was checking in, was asking me how I am. After my last egg retrieval that I had done, she sent me this note and it said, no one deserves to be a mom more than you. Any baby would be lucky to have you. And what you have put yourself through, like any child that comes into this world, to know that they were so loved, right? So like one of the things Jen would just say to me is like, one, you can stop this at any time. You get to decide when's been enough for your body. And also you get to tell this baby that you tried literally for years, thousands upon thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, ruined your body. And what a beautiful thing to be able to tell your kid. So she gave me permission both ways that like multiple things can be true. And in some ways she was really good at holding the complexity, I would call it, of like, you get to choose when to stop and you get to choose to keep going.
What would you add, Jen? Anything in particular that you tried to keep in mind or be conscious of?
No, I think it speaks to also the depth of our relationship, because I think that sometimes, as someone who is child-free, you get in conversations where people are talking about pregnancy or they're talking about motherhood, and you're like, okay, I don't know how to connect to what they're talking about, because typically the conversation is around, I don't know, like what the kids are eating for lunch or something. I don't know. But I think, I don't know. I'm checked out in those conversations, to be honest. I don't know what the fuck you guys are talking about. But I think that the disconnect happens where we're not talking on a deeper level of what's going on in motherhood. Like that's where we're just connecting as human beings. And I think Emmalee and we're always talking on a deeper level. She's not necessarily talking to me about what she made her kids for lunch. She's talking about like what motherhood is like for her, or she's thinking about like the depths of like the decision that she's making. And so it's easy to connect and relate when you're talking on a deeper level about what this experience is like for you. Because you can connect to those emotions and you can connect to those feelings. And even if you, as someone who's child-free, you don't have kids and you can't connect to what's happening on a day-to-day, you can empathize and connect with what it must be like to be in that experience emotionally. So
I mean, just you talking about the empathy, right? Like I think from someone who has kids, we have this fear that if I tell the truth about how hard this is, if I tell the truth that we have fleeting moments of regret, right? Nobody wants to talk about that. You talk about like fleeting moments of like, oh, maybe I want to have kids. Bullshit. If you are a parent and you've never had a fleeting moment of regret of like, I have ruined my life. What was I thinking? Oh my goodness, it will never be the same. But I think that there's this fear that if I was to admit that to anyone child-free around me, that what they might think about me is, well, you asked for it, your choice. So our fear of being judged and dismissed, I think really keeps us from getting closer in that way. Where like, I mean, I think also because of everything I went through, I was so raw and I was so fucked up from the postpartum that I was just like, I have made a mistake and I am very, very unwell. And because it was so bad, it allowed me to be so honest and vulnerable and for Jen to meet me there. And at no point did I think she was, I'm sure there was times where she thought this, she won't admit it, but I wasn't thinking like, she's like, oh, well, you did this to yourself. But I think that's our fear, right? My fear is that they won't get me and they won't see me, so I can't show them me. Because the reality is if we're talking about is what our kids ate for lunch, it is boring conversation. It's like talking about weight loss. Like this is not interesting. Talking about, holy shit, here's motherhood has ripped me open and here's what's happening for me. That's depth, that's intimacy, that's a good relationship.
It's so similar to, I think, why a lot of child-free women aren't open to talking about that, the 1% or the wistful moments, or because it's like we feel like we have to guard ourselves so much against the naysayers, the ones who are like, oh, well, I knew it, or there's still time. I'm 44 now. I don't think anyone's going to say you're only 44, but sure, like, science and everything, you're only 44. And when we allow ourselves to be open about the nuance of this decision and whatever choice we make, that's where we can have like the actual connection. But I also think that's, to your point, like why we keep things often either more surface level or we don't engage at all across I don't know what we're going to call this, not the gender divide, the reproductive choices divide, right? between women. So
I do. And I think that, and like, let's say that we could think about that. Like if we could really think about the complexity and that many, many things can be true at once, right? That it can be true that there is a part of me that misses my child-free life. And there's a part of me that can't imagine life without kids. And there's a part of me that feels jealous of Jen that will have a really bad day. Like, I shouldn't say bad. We're very lucky to do what we do. But there are days that we record, 4 or 5 episodes of the podcast in a row. And Jen will say to me, I just got to go home and melt on the couch. And all I can think is, I have to go parent 2 children. And so there's part of me that has jealousy. And there's a part of me that thinks like, oh man, like, I would never do this. So like, if we can sit here and hold the complexities and the nuance of all of this, and I can do the same thing for Jen, that there are moments that she thinks, oh shit, it would be really nice to have a little one come up and grab me. Or it would be really nice that at the end of my life, I'm surrounded by these little kids.
That's the thing. You just have to make friends with your friends' kids.
Totally.
Yes, exactly. Auntie Jen is Emmalee's #1 Snapchat friend. And if I can see all the nuance and complexity for her and she can see it for me and we can hold that, can't everything be true at once?
Okay, let me ask you this. What about those women who are listening who are like, yeah, but the problem is my friends aren't allowing me into that nuance. And it is really just because, I hear from women who, again, are either on the fence or they've decidedly chosen that child-free path. And they're like, I go hang out with my friends. And I think this often happens more so in group settings, right? Where it's like power in numbers. There's 8 of us. We all went to university together. I'm the only one without kids. And my God, all they talked about for 2 or 3 hours were the kids, the baby daddies, the nannies, the breastfeeding, the, daycare schedule. And they feel super forgotten, neglected, like my life doesn't matter. They find it pretty darn boring. Like, what would you suggest to someone who's in that situation? Because I have people who are like, I feel like I just need to call it quits on this friendship, like, because there's so little in it for me right now. So what would you counsel or advise them to think about, do the conversations they might want to have if they're in that boat?
I mean, I have been in this situation, right, where I go to a group dinner and everyone is, and I see it as like, they're coming from this place where they're like exhausted and they just need to like connect over so I'm looking kind of underneath it once again, as I do with everything. But I think the thing that I'm going to say also probably connects to the fact that I'm a therapist and slightly socially adept now. In that, when
You're socially adept,
just like a little, and I'll tell you why.
I totally get that from you.
You know what I mean? I'll tell you why. Like when you become a therapist, you're like, okay, honestly, I guess I've always been like this. I just want to connect with people on a deeper level. Like that's what fulfills me. That is what makes me feel like I am getting something from this relationship, from this dinner. And so my first suggestion would be like, can you ask any deeper questions that makes you understand like kind of what's going on for them, as opposed to them talking about like, oh, the nanny did this. And can you take it any deeper? You know, can you, so that you have the ability to like connect with them, this new version of them, this version of them that's going through this experience, because it can be really isolating, right? To be at a dinner and to feel like, okay, well, everyone can connect over this thing. I've had that experience. And, you know, I think it's also important to go in with that expectation of like, listen, I'm going to a dinner with all moms, right? And like all of my friends have 2 kids and they're all the same age. Like they're going to connect more over this. Does that mean that they don't think my life matters? Does that mean that they don't value me? You know, I think we attach a lot of meaning to that when we're feeling left out or we're not feeling connected. Or does that mean that like they're all struggling and they have this thing to connect over, and maybe like, yeah, that does make me feel left out, but does it mean I can't connect with them in different ways? Like, I think that part of that is the meaning that we attach to feeling left out, because it's such a bad feeling. We don't really know how to work with it. And so how do you also shift the conversation, right? How do you jump in and say like, hey, listen to what happened to me? Or like, hey, tell me about like, you know, what was that like for you when you went through XYZ? You know, like you get to, you know, move into the conversation, put your input in. And I think sometimes when we feel left out, we like further isolate ourselves. We pull ourselves further and further out. We kind of shut down, as opposed to saying, okay, how can I insert myself into this conversation in a way that feels authentic to me?
So I think about in terms of like the therapeutic idea we're talking about is like the least generous interpretation versus the most generous interpretation, right? So Jen's coming in with the most generous interpretation of these people are tired and they want to vent and they want to connect and they really need this time, right? The least generous interpretation is like these people are kind of selfish twats. And so I think the other part though is when you are the one of the 8, you need to actively try to take up more space. Now that is very difficult for someone who's more introverted or more shy or already struggles with taking up space. But the thing I would also say as a reminder to anyone listening who has kids, who maybe isn't thinking enough about their child-free friend, ask them how the freak they are, man. Like check in on your friends. Like I do think we can get really wrapped up in ourselves. And I'm going to tell you another secret. And this feels very much like my mom in like the early 90s giving this advice, which is that like, I also think sometimes we don't ask because we're jealous. Sometimes I don't ask what Jen does over the weekends because I'm like, her weekend was definitely way better than mine. Right? Like there is a part of, I don't let myself really look at my own jealousy and my own envy for what I don't have. And it's often because we're also not connecting with that part of ourselves, right? So like, I also think as a parent, it's really important that you have an individual sense of self. Go out with your child. Jen is the best because let me tell you, we went to this great DJ last week and we were like, oh, we're going to pretend like we're 22. We're going to go see this DJ. We behaved as if we were 22. The next day I woke up and reminded I am not in my 20s anymore. But she is the friend I get to do that with. She's not checking her phone for the kids. She's not running about getting at. And that night I was like, oh, I'm going to drive back. And she was like, I knew you were going to. So then I was like, you know what? I'm going to fucking stay. We're going to eat a bunch of Dominoes and I'm going to sleep here overnight. And so instead of not letting yourself touch that part of yourself and ignoring that friend, how can I let myself be the part of myself that I've lost and been missing with them?
Yeah.
So good.
Jen's a great part, right? Like, you know, like how do I use this? And not that should I only party with Jen? No, of course not. Although she is a great
with
time.
you ladies next time. Please do.
But like, I know she's going to be available. It's great. I know I can stay at her house. I'm not worried about children wake me up in the morning, besides her fur children. And I think there's a part is if I'm to think about the parts of myself that I miss, could this friend also help me do that? Am I looking right? Like friends serve so many different purposes and they hit so many different parts of ourselves. And I think for a lot of moms, they're ignoring the part of themselves because they miss it and they don't really want to look at it and touch it. But we need to connect with our individual selves. We should revisit that part of ourselves. We should be connected to us. And having child-free friends, I think, is a great way
to be
to
that
do
friend
it.
for you.
What you share there, Emmalee, to me, it kind of speaks of like maybe some of the assumptions or misconceptions that we have around like what it is to be a mom, or like like you say, the least versus most generous interpretation of things. And for example, I know with this feeling that some child-free women have of like being excluded or being on the outs, I think it's often overlooked that like being a mom can also be lonely, right? Like I think as much as maybe a mom may not recognize their child-free friend may be feeling like lonely or left out at a certain stage of life, I think we assume that everybody else is just like, oh, they're just must be always hanging out with their mom friends and everything's amazing. So I'm wondering if either of you can share like maybe some other sort of like assumptions or misconceptions that should be brought to the light so that we can have better understanding of each other.
Okay, I have one that made me think of that is that, yeah, I think the piece that you said that when you are child free, you do assume that everyone who has kids like isn't available. Okay. You're just like, oh, they won't be available. But I do think it's important as someone who's child free, something I have to remind myself is that like, you know, for someone who has kids, they want to be invited. They want the opportunity to go do these things, to revisit this version of themselves that maybe they feel like they haven't connected with in a while. And so I think that's a really important thing, and a way to stay connected to your friends who do have kids is to remind yourself that, you know, give them the opportunity to at least come and join you at a concert. Or, because I do think it's easy to forget. You're like, oh, they're with their kids, you know, oh, they're doing this. And it creates a divide, you know, when they no longer are top of mind in terms of inviting them to do things that they might enjoy. And listen, if they say no, they say no. If they can't come, they can't come.
Well, and someone's going to be listening to this and they're going to think like, oh, well, like that would be so nice that I could say yes to the concert. And listen, there are times you cannot. Your kid gets sick, you don't have childcare, your partner's out of town, whatever it is, you're a single mom. Say to somebody, I can't do it, but please keep inviting me. I want to be included. Thank you for the invitation. Keep me on the mind, right? Like, I wish I could make it this time. Like, you know, remind people like I'm saying no, but like I want to be included in this, because sometimes when you say no all the time, people are like, well, I'm not going to keep inviting you then. So remind them, hey, I want to be thought of. Thank you for including me. It's a no this time, but like, please keep me on the list.
I think there's similar misconceptions that child-free people also don't want to have to do with like family life too. Like I know I've had friends say things like, well, that would be boring for you, or I knew you wouldn't want to come to the kid's birthday party. And frankly, you know, I'm probably not going to stay for 5 hours, but like I'd find it maybe cool to come by and like have a drink and a slice of pizza and like see your kid, you know, get hyped up on sugar and leave, like, or not. But I think again, like we just shouldn't be making assumptions and fine, you know, but I think for me, something that's been hurtful as a child-free person, as I can think of one friend in particular who there's been the comment of like, well, it's just a family thing. We're only doing it with kids. I can think about a Thanksgiving dinner they had, like only with kids this year. And when you've historically been included in something and then suddenly because you don't have kids, you're not, that's tough. I almost would just rather not know that it's happening. And I've been excluded because I don't have children.
Yeah. No,
I don't know.
Listen, that happens to me all the time too. And yeah, it is nice to be invited. And then when I'm not invited, I think to myself, is that something I would want to go to?
Good point.
For the most part, I'm like, you know what? I probably wouldn't have ended up going. And once again, I think this feeling, I think when we are left out of something, it triggers something within us that is like really, really deep, right? All of us have experienced that feeling of being left out, right? When we were growing up in school. And so feeling left out, no matter what, triggers something within us. There's pain that comes with it. But to be able to meet that pain and say, okay, listen, once again, what meaning am I making of this? Does this mean that they don't like me? Does this mean that they don't want to hang out with me? Does this mean, right? Because we tend to attach meaning to that makes us feel pretty bad, makes us feel pretty disconnected. Or do we look at that and say, okay, you know, maybe they just wanted to be kids. Maybe they didn't want to have to think about entertaining like a bunch of people, right? Maybe they wanted it to be smaller. If they invite their, you know, one child-free friend, do they have to invite XYZ? You know, there's so much that goes into that. And so I think meeting that pain that we experience when we are left out, talking ourselves through it, to be able to say, okay, does this mean that they don't like me, they don't love me, they don't care about me? Not necessarily, because I know that's what the pain is initially saying to us.
This is a very funny conversation to have because my daughter's birthday is this weekend and Jen is coming. And I have thought countless times, oh God, poor Jen that she said yes to this party. Like the amount of times that I have been like, oh God, like I'm going to text her and tell her, don't even come. I feel so bad. And she's coming.
I'm coming. Also, there was one time, we share a calendar, obviously. Do you remember the story? And one time, so Emmalee has like big birthdays for her when her kids turn 1. And like after that, it's like, I think, they do nothing. But I think it was like when Millie was turning 2 or 3 or something. It was in our calendar because we share a calendar. And I was like, and I saw it and I was like, oh my God, Em. I was like, I am so sorry. I totally forgot Millie's birthday was this weekend and I won't be able to make it. And she was like, you weren't invited.
Ouch.
And I was like, oh, thank God. Oh, thank God.
Right. But like, and in that moment, because it was like, just like it was literally my parents that was coming, right? It was like the smallest thing. But it's true. But there is a part of me that feels bad asking Jen to come, right? So like when we're not having enough open conversations, our assumptions do get the best of us, right? I assume that she would hate this and maybe she will come on Sunday and hate it, but she'll lie to me. And she'll tell me that she didn't.
And here's the thing. I will love parts of it. And I'll hate parts of it. But isn't that the case with any party?
Absolutely. Yeah, totally.
And it like just to be very transparent that like, I'm going to go. I'm going to love seeing Emmalee. I'm going to love seeing like friends of hers. The kids will be loud and throwing things and and I'll get to eat cake and I will love that. I'll get to swim in her pool. Like there's so many pieces of it that I'm going to love. And I think just the part of like, I'll love to be connected to this experience for her and for her daughter. Like that's what feels important, is to be a part of big events, right?
Yeah.
The first birthday feels like a big event to me. If I'm invited to every birthday after that, chances are I'm not going to go. And I'm going to say, what present can I send? And so just being very honest with yourself too, of like what, like friendship wise, connection wise, like what feels important for me to attend? Do I actually want to be invited to every birthday party? Is that something I actually want to do? And can I still stay connected to this person and not go to their second, third, fourth birthday party?
And I think it takes a lot of, when we really think about these friendships, like I think it takes a lot of active communication versus passive communication, right? So the active communication Jen and I have a lot is me saying like, don't send her anything. But there has been times where I have called Jen and said, I need you to come. Last year I was pregnant. My husband was going hiking in Montana. I can't remember. And I called Jen and I said, this day to this day, I need you to come stay at my house. Here's exactly what I need from you. And she was like, okay, great. Right. So like the difference is like we have a lot of active communication. I don't say to her like, oh man, I'm going to be by myself. It's going to be overwhelming. I wish somebody would come out. I say to her, here's what I need. Is there any chance you could come? Right. So like really actively asking for what you need in a friendship or relationship, where Jen will say to me, like, I actually really need quiet and to not hear about this. And I need to get off this phone call. And I'm like, sounds good, babe. And so like, really, how do we have active communication giving the most generous interpretation? And how do we just really be open? Because I think the assumptions, the interpretations, and the stories we tell ourselves is what leads to rupture in relationships.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Okay, I'm putting you two ladies on the spot, but I actually would like to propose something. Now, I know you're both friends with Amanda White, who's been on the podcast a few times. And we did a few episodes called Dear Former Fence Sitter, because she was a former fence sitter. Now, neither of you are fence sitters, but I'm thinking it could be fun to do some sort of variation of that where people send their letters about friendship, because we've got some tricky friendship things around this decision. And so I'm putting it out there now. We'll just get my dear producer to cut this if you ladies after say, Keltie, no. But it would be fun to come back and like maybe have the two of you tackle and share your thoughts on some particular situations pertaining to friendship for people who are on the fence or have chosen the child-free path, for any moms who are listening, to help them navigate their own situations in terms of how they can have that open communication, how they can assume the best, etc. So thoughts?
We would love.
Wouldn't miss it for the world,
okay,
babe.
fun. Let's do it. Before we wrap up, can I ask either of you, like, where can we find you? How can we find a therapist in your practice? Because God knows we all need good therapy these days.
You can find us at The Therapy Group. It's thetherapygroup.com. Pretty straightforward. We have about 40 therapists in the practice.
Wow.
Every single therapist is systemically trained. We do individual, couples, family therapy, sex therapy, with a whole range of specialties. We have 2 in-person locations in Philadelphia and Westchester, and then we have virtual locations all across the United States. So if you are someone who needs support, if you're a fence sitter, if you need support in motherhood, if you need support in being child-free or in your relationship, we are more than happy to help you. Emmalee and I do all of the matching. So when you fill out a contact form on our website, we personally match you with a therapist that's going to be the right fit for you. And if you want to listen to us yap more about therapy and psychological topics, we would love for you to listen to our podcast, Shrink Chicks. And you can follow us on Instagram at Shrink Chicks and send us in your questions.
Amazing. Thank you. Emmalee, anything you'd like to add, or did Jen cover it all?
No. Listen to Shrink Chicks. Start with Keltie's episode. It was a great one, and we're just honored to be here. Thanks for having us on.
Wonderful. Okay, we'll link to all the places, including that episode of the Shrink Chicks featuring me. I don't know why that's a mouthful for me.
It is.
It's hard.
Do you ever say Shrink Dicks by accident?
You know, we were like, if we were gonna start an OnlyFans, you know,
it would be
Shrink Dicks.
If we were still in our prime and anyone wanted this for OnlyFans,
Right.
I always say, thank God OnlyFans wasn't there in my college age. I would have been on it so fast.
Is to shrink his dick.
Right. There's something out there for everyone.
There's something for everyone.
Yes.
Okay.
Keltie, you'd be surprised.
I actually, nothing surprises me these days. Can I just say,
Good point.
being in this world the last several years, nothing is surprising.
Yeah.
Try me. All right. Well, you can find these lovely ladies on OnlyFans under Shrink Dicks. We'll include all the places. Definitely check out their fantastic therapy practice. And we'll have you back soon for
Please do.
a dear something. We can call it dear former fence sitter. I mean, semantics, but we'll talk about friendship. So if anybody has a question, a pressing issue, a concern, send me a DM, an email. You know where to find me. Again, I'll include those links, and we'll have you back soon for another convo.
Amazing.
see
Thank
you
you
soon.
so much.
Did you know that you can not only listen to the Kids Are Child-Free podcast, but you can actually also watch the Kids Are Child-Free podcast by checking out the Kids Are Child-Free YouTube channel? Yes, it is true. You know what? I love having these conversations with my guests, and I just feel like when we're able to immerse ourselves in the visual experience of these really important conversations, it lends just that much more. I've also been told, side note, Chris was totally teasing me the other day saying, my God, look at your expressions. He loves my very expressive face, but you can see me making all the faces, all the reactions when I talk to my guests. That in itself, I would say, is entertainment enough. No? In any case, check out the YouTube channel. Again, you'll find every episode of the Kids or Child-Free podcast on there. And you can also check out a bunch of different short form videos on there, other podcasts that I've appeared on. We've got all kinds of good stuff for you, again, on the Kids Are Child-Free YouTube channel, which I will link in the show notes of this episode. Make sure you subscribe when you head over there. And if there's an episode you love, leave us a little love, share some thoughts, ask some questions. I will do my very best to respond to each one of you over there on YouTube. All right, that is all from me. Thank you so much and have a beautiful day.